Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to the show. Boy, it's been a tough couple of weeks, hasn't it? If you're halfway intelligent and halfway informed, I think you have to say this has been one of the worst 2 weeks in American history in my lifetime. I don't have to run through the reasons. You know what's happened in Afghanistan, the most incompetent move by the United States government that I think I've ever seen. Um, Absolute blithering idiocy that led to the death of 13 Americans and who knows how many hundreds of civilians. Um, oh boy, it's the anniversary of 9/11, which is always a tough week. That was the day that everything changed for all of us. I know it did for me. Vaccine mandates. Boy, who knew? Huh? Land of the free and the home of the brave. And we just gave up our freedoms because we're afraid of catching a cold with a 98 to 99% survivability rate. I can't get into all that. To say it's been a rough stretch is putting it mildly. And yeah, just the other day, I mean, during all this, if you follow me online at all, other than the podcast, you know that YouTube started taking down my herb videos for no apparent reason. Apparently, in the year 2021, it's become controversial to say that herbs can be used medicinally or to question government officials. Who knows? Who knows where this is all going? But, you know, it's a beautiful day. It's a gorgeous mid-September day. It's sunny, sky's clear, little hint of fall in the air. It feels nice. And the Braves are winning again. Hey, thank God for baseball. Anybody that grew up in the South in the 90s, like I did, the world just feels right when the Braves are winning their division. But, I figure this week you can either act like the world's ending, think the sky's falling, or you can have faith, hope, and believe in the best, and that things are going to work out. So I personally took a little mental vacation. Other than writing my next book, I will have another herb book coming out soon. I think this one's just going to be fantastic. Actually, maybe the best book I've ever done, maybe the best book I ever do, and I'll have some news on that within a month. But I figured, hey, if we're reliving the Carter years, well, I'll just listen to some music from the 70s. I've been listening to a lot of old punk rock, a lot of New York Dolls and the Ramones and Iggy Pop, a lot of weird stuff. And I guess if this goes on much longer, I'll get into some Waylon and Willie and David Allen Coe. Got gas prices going through the roof and inflation on the rise, and the whole world's going to hell. You might as well put on some David Allen Coe, right? Waylon was one of the best there ever was. Another guy, it's just total aside. Trust me, we'll get into herbs here in a minute, I promise. I got to know a singer-songwriter many years ago named Guy Clark. You may have heard of him. Guy Clark wrote some of the greatest songs ever. And if you need a mental vacation, if you want to unwind and you're not, you know, want to listen to some old punk rock or, the Bee Gees, hey, I'll get into the Bee Gees every now and then. If you want to listen to some just seriously good, meaningful country music, beautiful stuff, Guy Clark and Townes Van Zandt were just amazing. And Guy Clark, he died about a year or so ago. I think it was COVID related. I don't minimize the effects of COVID. People who are in poor health are definitely susceptible to COVID. I've never once denied that it's a serious disease. I've only pointed out that it's not the Spanish flu. Okay. Well, I met Guy Clark when I was maybe 16 or 17 years old. And if you know anything about the man, he was gruff, hard drinking, had his issues with drugs, um, real Texas cowboy poet. And I met him at a bluegrass festival in North Carolina, Merle Fest. Everybody that knows anything about bluegrass knows about Merle Fest. I used to be backstage every year. And here was a man in his, I guess, 70s, debilitatingly hungover at, 11 a.m. or so, who would sit down with a scruffy teenage kid and smoke his cigarettes while he pulled it together and be just as kind and open and welcoming, telling me stories about Townes Van Zandt and him and um, Rocky Erickson of the 13th Floor Elevators. It's sort of a legendary Texas musician. Janis Joplin, Chris Christopherson, telling me all these stories, all these legendary people. Billy Joe Shaver. That's another one. I never met Billy Joe Shaver, but my word, I went to some great concerts. But if you really need a mental vacation and you need something that is a little more meaningful than you're going to see on the news these days, there's a greatest hits compilation by Guy Clark, and his debut record, Old Number Seven, was just fantastic. And Guy Guy was just he was a great man, and he's very 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 sadly missed. Townes Van Zandt was his best friend, and Townes was a different, like Dennis Miller would say, he was a different sort of cat. He suffered with mental illness and drug addiction his entire life. He was manic depressive, bipolar. He wrote some beautiful songs. You may know Poncho and Lefty. That was a hit for Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard. He did an album called Our Mother the Mountain in, I guess, the early 70s, late 60s, which is astounding. Probably wrote the saddest song ever written called Tecumseh Valley. Um, Definitely right up there with Guy Clark's Let Him Roll and Waiting for a Train, Desperados Waiting for a Train. Um, he could also write some of the funniest songs, like No Deal. No Deal was a good one. And Thunderbird, about this guy that discovers, cheap Thunderbird wine that was old Muscatel that used to be popular in the stores on the wrong side of the town when I was a kid. So, no matter how bad things are, keep your chin up. A lot of my friends, especially online, people I don't really know, but I communicate with them a lot. They're just absolutely freaked out right now, understandably. Things are bad. They're probably going to get a whole lot worse, but we have to keep faith. We have to keep hope. We have to keep our chins up and our heads down. A friend of mine used to always say, "Hey, buddy, keep your head down." He was an old man. I believe he had served in Korea. Yeah, yeah, he was a Korea veteran. And we chat every now and then. He'd always say, "Keep your head down, buddy. Keep your chin up and your head down." So let's get into the herbs because that's what you're all here for. And I'm looking forward to it. Once again, we're working through Botany in a Day by Thomas J. Elpel. We're learning how to identify herbs in the wild by their plant families and how to use them. And one of the most interesting families of herbs is the everlasting tribe. Now, the everlastings are a subclass of the asters, just like the chamomiles we talked about recently. But the everlastings look very different. They're usually described as grayish. I usually see them at a distance as white and then get closer, and yeah, they're grayish or silvery. But Mr. Elpel says if you find a member of the aster family with grayish vegetation and papery, often colored bracts surrounding a flower with disc flowers, but no ray flowers, then it's probably a member of the everlastings. Only Inula has ray flowers. Now, the bracts around the flowers are properly described as scarious, which means thin and dry and translucent. Please note that the plants of the chamomile tribe also have somewhat scarious or scarious bracts, but the chamomiles have a strong odor, whereas the Inulas have no odor. Um, Pearly Everlasting is probably the most recognizable, at least in my area. It's the one I see most often of the Everlastings. And it's an interesting plant. It, he says a tea of the plant is principally astringent and diaphoretic, also with expectorant properties. It is used in the expected ways for colds, fevers, sore throats, and to expel worms. Smoke is inhaled to relieve headaches. Early Everlasting has a mild antihistamine effect and has been used in the treatment of asthma. Now, you know, the reason this stands out to me is because where I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, and I probably would say throughout the South, this isn't known as pearly everlasting, it's known as rabbit tobacco. Okay, so my asthma is inherited asthma, and my uncle had the same asthma. Many members of my family have that same asthma. And when they were kids, they would smoke rabbit tobacco to relieve their asthma. Um, there is a fella down in Alabama. You may have heard of him. If you're a fan of my show, you're probably a fan of similar such shows or similar such authors. He calls himself the Southern Herbalist. I actually was unaware of him when I titled myself the Southern Appalachian Herbalist. I wasn't trying to rip him off or anything, but he's really good, and I've gotten into a lot of his stuff recently. And he recommends making a tincture of rabbit tobacco for various, bronchial disorders, various allergies, various lung conditions. His name is Daryl Patton. Now, Daryl Patton, I think he's from Lookout Mountain. He's from, I think it's the southernmost mountain in the Appalachian Range, which is in Alabama. Uh, he's written a really good book on what he learned from the local Appalachian herbalists. Uh, Seems he learned a lot of the stuff I did from some other people that were also featured in the Foxfire book, so that's good. His teacher was Tommy Bass. And there are a few books written on Tommy Bass, actually. You might really want to look this guy up. If you live in the Southeast, if you live in the Appalachian Mountains, check out Daryl Patton. He is the Southern Herbalist. His website is theSouthernHerbalist.com. And he offers some in-person and online instruction. And his book is very good. I think you'll enjoy. I think you'll really enjoy learning what he has to teach. But he makes a tincture out of rabbit tobacco. I always use it as a smoking herb. Interestingly enough, several herbs are called rabbit tobacco. What was first introduced to as rabbit tobacco to me was not one of the everlastings at all. It was actually lobelia. Lobelia, as I've discussed before, has a nicotine-like effect. It is a bronchodilator and antispasmodic for the lungs, and it can stop an asthma attack. I believe, from what I understand, looking into some of the older um, Southern herbal books and teachings, and really from what I was taught, but looking at books like Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests and such, which was written around the Civil War, um, those herbs were pretty much used interchangeably, and there were probably a lot of formulas made using both of those herbs. So people just came to refer to both of them as Indian tobacco or rabbit tobacco. But yeah, um, Pearly Everlasting is its own herb, and it's unique and it's useful. And honestly, this is one of those roadside weeds that I just see everywhere. It's really underutilized. So get out and find that one. You probably can. Actually, right now is the time to look for it because you can really see the color of the plant standing out against the darker green and sort of browning grass of early fall. Another one is pussy toads. This is Antinaria. This one was more used in Europe. It contains tannins, volatile oils, resins, and bitters. It is astringent and diuretic, a tea used for liver inflammations and for irritations of the upper intestines. As an astringent, it is useful as a vaginal douche. It may act as a vasoconstrictor and raise blood pressure. You'll see that one written about in a lot of the Old English herbals. Two more that are really interesting. Plain everlasting. The names here can get a little confusing because you've got pearly everlasting and you've just got everlasting, but everlasting is also called cudweed. And cudweed's another one of our very common herbs in my area. There's some growing in my driveway, actually, that I had to transplant, relocate just the other day. Cudweed is Gnaphalium. That's actually spelled with a G. It's Gnaphalium. So it's got a silent G and a silent, well, PH, which usually is pronounced like an F. So Gnaphalium is astringent, diaphoretic, and diuretic. It is used especially as a gargle for sore throat. It is also often smoked for headaches and used to expel worms. So you sort of see a pattern there, and these herbs have usually been smoked, really by Native Americans, and they passed the practice on to the early settlers, and that's where we learned. All right, so another one that is really more commonly used in European herbal medicine is elecampane. And this one has a lot of use in German folk medicine, also very popular in British herbalism. So I'll lay down Mr. Elpel's book for just a moment because he didn't mention a lot about it because it's not one of our native herbs. It was brought here by our ancestors. And I will turn to Miss Greaves, Maud Greaves, A Modern Herbal, written in 1931. Her herbal is really unique, and it should be on everyone's shelf. It comes in two volumes. She brought together all the European herbal traditions and put them under one work. So she starts with the ancient Greeks and she goes through, the monastic medicine and she goes through the Old English medicine and she quotes everybody from Pliny to Culpeper to Gerard to, you name it. And she gives you the history of the herbs and she gives you the usage of the herbs. And she was also very interested in American herbalism and she was looking at the medical dispensatories, which were the manuals that the pharmacists used to compound herbal medicines for the physicians at the time. They were still using plant medicine. This was mainstream medicine, and she presented it to the average person so you could do herbalism in your home. And what she wrote of elecampane is an excellent example of this. She says, elecampane was known to the ancient writers on agricultural and natural history, and even the Roman poets were acquainted with it, and mention inula as affording a root used both as medicine and as a condiment. Horace, in English satire, relates how Fundanius first taught the making of a delicate sauce by boiling it in bitter inula, and how the Romans, after dining too richly, pined for turnips and the appetizing inulus acidus. So inula has a long use as a food, but as a medicinal herb, it was known as Helonian in Greek. It was written of by all the Greek herbalists. Gerard, the 1500s or so, British botanist, plant collector, herbalist, says it took the name Helenium of Helena, the wife of Menelaus, who had their hands full when Paris came and stole her away to Phrygia. Another legend states that it sprang from her tears. I mean, this is, a really old herb. And I won't get too much more into the history. Let's just talk about the medicinal uses. She says the plant, which was actually considered a drug plant at the time, meaning it was something a doctor would actually prescribe instead of writing a prescription for, say, old penicillin in the 1940s and 50s or so. A doctor would have actually written a prescription for elecampane. She says the drug elecampane consists of both the rhizome and rootstocks and is official in most pharmacopoeias. It was official medicine at the time. And this was, 1930s. This wasn't that long ago. For pharmaceutical use, the root is taken from plants when 2 or 3 years old. When more advanced, it becomes too woody. As a rule, the root is dug in autumn. Elecampane root has a somewhat glutinous taste, but by chewing it becomes subsequently aromatic, slightly bitter and pungent, and has an agreeable, somewhat camphorous or orris-like odor. The medicinal qualities are diuretic, tonic, diaphoretic, expectorant, alterative, antiseptic, astringent, and gently stimulant. So, all right, in layman's terms, or terms that anybody these days would use, diuretic means it draws fluid off. Tonic means it tones tissue. Diaphoretic means it helps you sweat and break a fever. Expectorant means it brings up mucus and congestion from the lungs. Alternative means it gradually brings a person back into health. Now, sort of another word for tonic, as opposed to toning tissues, it's more like toning the whole system. Antiseptic, of course, means it kills germs. Astringent means it tightens tissue, and gently stimulant means just that, it gently stimulates a person. It was employed by the ancients in certain diseases of women, in dropsy and skin affections. The name scabwort arose from the fact that a decoction of it is said to cure sheep affected with scab, and the name horseheal was given to it from its reputed virtues in curing cutaneous diseases of horses. That means skin diseases, okay? In herbal medicine, it is chiefly used for coughs, consumptions, and other pulmonary complaints, being a favorite domestic remedy for bronchitis. It has been employed for many years with good results in chest affections, for which it is a valuable medicine and is in all chronic diseases of the lungs, asthma, and bronchitis. It gives relief to the respiratory difficulties and assists expectoration. Its principal employment as a separate remedy in acute catarrhal infections, that means congestion, and in dyspepsia attended with reflection and debility. That means stomach upset, basically. Burping, upset stomach. Not necessarily diarrhea, but, heartburn. It is best given in the form of a decoction, the dose being a small teaspoon 3 times a day. The root can be candied and eaten as a sweetmeat. Lozenges used to be made from it, good for cough and congestion, settling a stomach. She says in the United States it has been highly recommended for both external use and for internal administration for diseases of the skin. It applied externally is somewhat rubefacient and has been employed as an embrocation in the treatment of sciatica, facial, and other neuralgia. So you can see that the L-campaign was a very useful medicine, and there's no wonder our ancestors brought it here as one of the most essential medicines they would bring from Europe to America. Culpeper, writing in mid 1600s or so, said that it cures putrid and pestilential fevers and even the plague. Even the plague. So, they really believe strongly in what we would now consider, in some places, an invasive weed. So the everlastings are a very useful family of plants, and this is the time to get out and start looking for them because the white, what I see as white, they say is light gray, of the plant really stands out. Now, another one that I think, shall we say, this is appropriate discuss after my videos have been taken off of YouTube, perhaps because I said certain herbs have antiviral properties. Oh no, yeah, maybe is YouTube working for the pharmaceutical industry these days? I don't know. Of course, I could have been banned just for making fun of Dr. Fauci. Who knows? Apparently, we don't live in the land of the free and the home of the brave anymore. But moving right along, honeysuckle. All right, you see honeysuckle everywhere. Again, this is considered an invasive weed. I've done a video on this one. Honeysuckle, specifically Japanese honeysuckle, grows everywhere in the South. I found it at the high elevations of the mountains. I find it in the swamps. I find it at the coast. Honeysuckle is just a wonderful plant. It was one of those first plants I learned to forage for when I was a very small child. I think most kids know that when honeysuckle's in bloom, well, first of all, you can find it from probably a mile away from with your nose. And then, you ride your bicycle over there and you pick a few flowers and you pull the green bits off. So you just have the flower and you suck out a little bit of nectar that tastes like honey. That's honeysuckle. You suck on it and get honey. I don't know if that's actually where the common name comes from, but That was my association as a kid, and I must have consumed gallons of honeysuckle nectar, and it actually makes an excellent honey when bees feed off of it. And some of the old mountain folks will put honeysuckle blossoms in their moonshine to sweeten it up. You know, honeysuckle is a great plant, even though it is technically an invasive weed. So let's talk about honeysuckle. There are actually several members of honeysuckle, but the most important one for this discussion is the Japanese honeysuckle. And it's the one that smells so nice. It's the one that you see everywhere in the springtime. The plant is a powerful antiviral. Actually, when the flowers of honeysuckle are combined with the fruits of forsythia, another non-native, often considered weedy plant, it makes one of the most powerful antiviral herbal medicines known. It is used extensively in Asia, and in this day and age, we all need to be growing it and using it. But there's so many plants in this family you would not even expect. I mean, elderberry, one day is considered a member of the honeysuckle family, another day the taxonomists kick it out of it. But elderberry is, yes, a tree type member of the honeysuckle family. And elderberry, also one of our most strongly antiviral plants. They always give this warning that if you eat raw elderberry, it can be toxic. Or they'll say if you make a tincture of leaves or stems of elderberry, it can be toxic. You know what? That is so overstated. I mean, I was just reading Stephen Herod Buhner's Herbal Antivirals just, I think it was last night, and he was talking about elderberry, and he said, yeah, it's toxic. It'll make you throw up. It doesn't mean it makes you sick. It doesn't mean it can poison you to death. It'll make you throw up. If you eat too much raw elderberry fruit, it'll make you throw up. You cook the elderberries, if you turn the elderberries into elderberry syrup, if you turn the elderberries into elderberry wine, you're probably not going to have any adverse reaction, but what you will have is a substance that prevents viruses from attaching to the cells that they need to invade in order to replicate. So already in this one family, Caprifoliaceae, or the honeysuckle family, we have two of the most powerful herbal antivirals known to man. Let's see what Mr. Alpert says about the honeysuckle family. He says, if you see a bush, or sometimes an herb, with flowers or berries in pairs, then it may be a member of the honeysuckle family. Berries also form in clusters or umbels. Members of this family are mostly bushes with opposite leaves and often pithy stems. And like on the elderberry tree, the stems are hollow. It's kind of interesting. They can actually be used as blowguns, but you don't want to put your mouth to the stem because it can make you sick. Probably not going to kill you. Maybe it could if you were very weak in condition, but it could make you nauseous while you're trying to shoot a dart at a squirrel or something, if you were in a survival situation. But it's really good to know. You can put, something else between your mouth and that tube, and you have a nice little blowgun or a breathing tube you can go underwater with. Native Americans use that quite a bit, actually, and they lived, so let's not worry about that. The flowers are regular, except in some species of Lonicera, I guess I should say. The bisexual flowers include five usually united sepals, five united petals, and usually five stamens, but sometimes four. The ovary is positioned inferior and consists of two, three, five, or eight united carpels. And this is another interesting thing. It matures into a fleshy berry, sometimes a drupe, or a fleshy fruit with a stony pit. Now, you know of elderberry, you know it's a berry, Sambucus. I mean, people have been eating it and using it for medicine for thousands of years. Just like I said, when you read something that says it's a poisonous plant, just understand this person who wrote it has no experience with this plant and disregard it, throw that book away and get another one. There's also a honeysuckle that forms nice big berries, almost like grapes, and they're called honeyberries, and it's a popular plant in permaculture. Look into honeyberries. It's just a really cool plant. It's vining and it grows in a wide variety of climates, and it's a nice fruit you can grow that probably also has some of the same medicinal values. It just really hasn't been studied as much as other members of the family. He says that this is a chemically complex family. Most of the species are borderline between being minimally inedible and slightly toxic. Well, that's his opinion. Many, but not all of the species produce edible berries, and they can be significantly bitter or astringent. Some of the plants have a toxic alkaloid either present in the fruits or vegetation. The vegetation typically has diaphoretic and laxative but astringent properties. Now, you know, my family goes way back in Europe, directly related to Richard Lionheart, King Edward the Confessor, the Carolls, who were the kings of Ireland, William the Conqueror, where people have been making and drinking elderberry wine and eating elder flowers um, for as long as they've walked the earth in that area. And if I minimize the toxicity of some of these plants, is that because I think you would have to be incredibly stupid to eat enough of it to poison yourself because you're going to start throwing up the very point where the toxicity sets in. So you would have to eat, throw up, eat again, throw up, eat again, throw up, and then you might get a little sick. But some of the family are a bit more toxic than others. Most of them I would not consider to be dangerous at all. I mean, Linnea is twin flower. This is an herb that was used in Native American medicine. It grows wild in the mountains. The plant has been used as a tonic for pregnancy and for painful or difficult menstruation. It is probably mildly astringent. You know, that's that one doesn't have an edible fruit. It's in the same family, and there's Lonicera. This is the honeysuckle that bears edible berries. He says they're usually bitter, but a frost improves their flavor. A European species may be poisonous. Okay. There's also one that's been bred specifically for the fruit, and I don't have any, but a lot of my permaculture friends do, and they say it's absolutely wonderful and delicious. It's definitely on my list to grow out next year. I mean, that's one I've been putting off for a while. I also need to plant my own elderberry trees. I don't have any, and that's to my own shame because in this day and age where we desperately need herbal antivirals, I could have these growing in my own yard if I had just been a little more proactive. He says the plant also is used as expectorant and laxative. Then he gets into the elderberries, the sambucus. You've got blue, black elderberries. There's even a Asian white elderberry. Um, this is just absolutely one of the most powerful herbs we have in our herbal arsenal against inflammation, against flu, against arthritis, rheumatism, against many, many viruses. A few weeks ago, I did an interview with Tori Lee. We were talking about seaweeds and how seaweeds can help prevent the viruses from attaching to cells. And I think it was in that discussion, I asked her, did you hear that whole controversy early on in COVID about how elderberry may create a cytokine storm? Cytokine storm is basically where the immune defense innate ability of your immune system gets so overcharged by the attack of the virus that it creates such an inflammatory response that your own immune system can kill you. And they said early on in the COVID outbreak that elderberry might actually cause that to happen. And we talked about it, and she said, those studies were taken out of context. I looked them up, I did my research, and that's just not true. Subsequently, I've looked them up and done my research, and that's just not true. Elderberry may help prevent viral infection, and it's not going to encourage or hasten or amplify a cytokine storm. Okay, not that we know of. No study has shown that to be the case. Well, I won't say it was a purposeful fear tactic, although it may have been because elderberry was actually becoming a popular supplement that could be bought commonly at like the grocery store or even Dollar General before COVID came along because people were beginning to realize that it could help prevent the flu. And when COVID came along, people thought, well, COVID virus is very similar to the flu virus. I'd probably better go get some elderberry. Maybe the pharmaceutical industry put out misleading information to prevent people from doing that, or maybe it was just an honest mistake. Okay, I'm not one to assign blame if I don't know it to be true, but I am one to check the fruit on the vine, be a little suspicious, if you know what I mean. And that one seemed a little suspicious. There is snowberry. The bark and leaves have astringent properties. A poultice is used for wounds, and a tea is an eye wash. The berries contain saponins, which may be used as a soap substitute or actually a fish poison. Any plant that contains saponins in an emergency, uh, if it makes a sudsy, soapy, like a lather, if you put that in water where fish are, will prevent them from absorbing oxygen through their gills, and they will float to the surface and can be easily harvested. That is illegal everywhere. Yeah, in a really bad situation, it's valuable knowledge to know, but it's not something you ever want to actually do. All right. So there's feverwort. A tea of the leaves is used as a diaphoretic to bring down a fever, hence the common name. A tea of the root contains alkaloids and is considered diuretic and cathartic. In addition to urinary disorders, it is used for menstrual disorders and constipation. A poultice of the root is used on snake bites and sores. And then there's viburnum. Viburnum, which is another of our most popular and useful herbs, is also a member of this same family. This family contains high bush cranberry, cramp bark, black haw. Cramp bark is so called because it is antispasmodic. It stops cramps. This is one of our most useful herbs for menstrual cramps, muscle spasms, and it's the whole family. The cramp bark is Gelder rose. The properties have been of the plants seem to be very similar in resources of southern fields and forests. They recommended black haw because that grows very commonly throughout the South. Further up north, they have high bush cranberry. Um, this is another member of the honeysuckle family, which is actually a small tree, and it's antispasmodic, nervine, astringent, and has diuretic properties. So, those are two families of herbs that are so incredibly useful, and especially in this day and time with the things that we all have on our minds, the things that talking about probably got me booted off of YouTube to definitely know about these plant families, be able to identify them in the wild, and be able to use them. So y'all have a great week. I'm going to say go Braves, but if you're not a Braves fan, I'm just going to say, look, in this day and age when things are as bad as they are, the news can drive you crazy. Take a little time to go for a hike, take a walk, go fishing. Go fishing. What's more pleasant than fishing? Spend some time with your family. Keep sane. Stay hopeful. Stay hopeful. Have faith that it's all going to work out because, that's the promise. It will. Y'all have a good one, and I'll see you here again next week.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.